kick off our news discussion today, I wanted to let everyone know about something that I found out about a couple weeks ago, which is that Arsenal is hosting youth soccer camps over the summer. So they are coming to the United States in a big way. They're hitting, I think it was like 50 cities or something. They're really pretty comprehensive in the area that they're covering, which is really cool. So all over the place. The nearest ones to my region of the country are not particularly close, which isn't terribly surprising given where I live. We'd have to go way out into Connecticut or New Jersey, nothing really attractive there. However, there is one in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I think Plano technically is where it is, although, like with World Cup, they call it Dallas. Yep. And so we have actually signed my son up. So whenever we next record after that happens, I will report back. But that is sure to be a fun time. So he's actually leaving school a little early because it overlaps with his last week of school. So, whatever. It's for a good cause.
Actually, yes, I didn't mean to ask that. When about this? What time? When is it?
All different times, depending on the location. And I have to imagine, because they do have Hale End staff that is running these, it's probably a fairly limited. They may only have 3 or 4 crews of people, and they just kind of hit 1 week at a time and kind of make their way through the country, probably. And I'm sure they probably also try to time it according to summer break schedules in different parts of the country. I know Texas and a lot of places in the South do have an earlier start to their summer break just because, severe heat hits a lot quicker than it does in our part of the country. So, yeah.
Well, at least in Houston, the school year actually starts earlier, because I know in New York, right, it doesn't start until after Labor Day. So it's the summer. I think actually the summer's shifted.
Exactly.
So the summer break starts earlier.
Right. So summer break starts earlier and ends earlier, and that's why the camp would make sense being a little bit earlier too. I saw that the ones that are in New Haven, for instance, like that is later. That would be his summer break. But so that's great, and it's actually cool. I mean, apparently part of this, obviously, they're scouting, and it's potential for you to get invited to fly to London as a result of this. Now, that is not something that I've mentioned to my son, and he doesn't have he's been trying to watch the show more, but hasn't had the greatest track record. So I think the secret will stay safe for a little bit longer. I don't want to get his hopes up, but yeah, it was I'm reminding myself, it was actually funny as we were watching the Newcastle match yesterday. He was asking about how that happens. Like, how does somebody play for Arsenal? Like, how does that happen? And I was telling him how, it's, who knows, for something like from this camp, they could decide that they would invite you to their academy or something like that. Messi traveled to Barcelona from Argentina. His family moved for him to go to their academy. That was how his career started. I told him, we'd have to work out the details, but I'd be open to talking about moving to London if that were something that happened to you. Not that I think it's likely, but it's a possibility. And he just started crying. He's like, I don't want to go to London. So,
yeah, I will say there are a lot of things that are changed and all that. And especially because he's an American citizen, he wouldn't be allowed to move over until he was a certain age. And now getting into visa restrictions and things like that. Obviously, Arsenal's purpose here is multifold. First, of course, is, as you said, scouring for talent across the U.S. Also, this is just sort of a general goodwill mission, right? They're here to, just to show the flag and just recruit fans and things like that. I suspect, too, I was curious about the dates, not so much in the context of summer vacation, but really thinking about the World Cup this summer.
Right.
So much of their staff is not going to be very busy during the World Cup because
that's true. Yeah.
So many of the players are going to be there. But I imagine that's partly what they may be trying to gamble on is the, you think the World Cup was cool? Why don't you come check out one of the, a team where all these guys play for? That's
right.
But still, definitely kind of cool and kind of interesting. If nothing else, it's just kind of a cool experience to say you'll be able, to be able to say he did, at least the one time. Yeah,
he comes away with a cool Arsenal training kit. It looks reminiscent. It doesn't have white sleeves, but red shirt, white shorts, red socks. It has the Arsenal crest, and it says in very clear letters underneath, like training camp or something. That's what's not to be confused with their actual academy.
Of course. And two, like, I mean, we say looking for players. I mean, they're obviously going to be, they're going to keep an eye out if there's anybody who's of interest to them. They'll make a note. They're not, and even the ones coming back to London, it's probably kind of this will be a nice experience for everybody. But
yeah. Yeah, and there is, as far as what their registration form said, they did ask if he is a goalkeeper or an outfield player, but also made it clear not to expect any goalkeeper specific instruction. Mm-hmm. But I wonder if they'll use that just to make sure that teams, like if they're breaking into scrimmages or something, they can use that in the beginning to make sure that there's a keeper on each squad or something. I don't know, but that was interesting. What I also found interesting as I was reading up on their summer camps is apparently, and not surprisingly, they do UK summer camps also. Mm-hmm. And these are even more in depth. So these last a few weeks at a time, and you basically stay in a boarding school in England. I mean, they have locations in and out of London in a few different places. And to me, that combines like a love of Arsenal and a love of Harry Potter, like staying in an English boarding school. Like how cool would that be? Like you're going to Arsenal Hogwarts.
Do remember, though, this is, of course, for English children for whom that has a very different different kind of connotations to it. Not the Harry Potter thing, but just, staying in the boarding schools. And there, I think that it is much more a serious recruitment kind of effort.
Yeah.
Just think about the length of time. Like, how long is the camp you're talking about? Is what, a week?
It's a week. It's a 1 week camp.
Yeah. So the length of time and the kind of instructions going to be available to the people there, I think is going to be right. But of course, it makes sense,
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's actually funny because so my son was asking, like, am I going to meet the players? I was like, no. First of all, no. Second, where are they going to be? Like their best players are playing for their countries. It is World Cup summer. So yeah, but it does make me wish for, and I don't know if they ever do this, but like an Arsenal fantasy camp for the grown-ups, like, that would be really cool.
I actually had one of our fearless leader from the Houston Gooners was in Tampa last weekend for the Fan Fest.
Right.
And he did say that, there were a lot of things going on there in connection to that, but he did say some of the smaller clubs did actually have some actually relatively well-known players come. But he said, that's really easy to do when when you're a club legend at Burnley to go meet the 5 fans and it's a little different than an Arsenal or a Chelsea, City, United, these teams that are going to have much more massive fan followings at this kind of event.
The next thing to talk about is this came across my news feed as I was scrolling through earlier in the week, and anything that mentions offside naturally catches my attention as one of the trickier rules in soccer. And I was like, wait a second, what does this headline say? First daylight offside goal scored in Canadian Premier League. And I'm thinking, daylight offside? What is going on there? And I guess maybe you can tell us a little more about it. This is a rule that they're debuting and kind of testing out in Canada?
Right. So this is all the brainchild of Arsene Wenger. So I have a lot of time for it. But basically, the idea is rethinking offside. The current offside rules pretty straightforward. No part of your body that can score can be beyond a player's body that can score a goal can be beyond the last defender. So like your hand could be, because you can't score with your hand, but anything else, head, knee, hip, toes, all of it has to be even with or behind the last defender. What they're saying here is basically giving it a cushion, a margin of error. The idea of, they call it daylight offside, because the idea when there's clear daylight between the attacker's position and the defender.
Only then are you offside, basically.
Only then would you be offside. And the idea is to encourage attack play and goal scoring. There obviously it's one thing to sit and come up with a rule. Then, of course, you have to test it, put it in a game situation. And so they got volunteers for the Canadian Premier League, which is officially the highest level of the sport in Canada. minus the 3 Canadian teams who play in MLS, but it, that's the top Canadian professional league, is trying the rule. And apparently this past week, I guess it was, so it was this past week. So I see it's the 19th, look at the calendar. So I guess this actually happened right before we recorded last week.
Right.
They did it in a game involving Pacific FC and Halifax Wanderers.
Yeah.
It appears, I think it was Pacific who scored. Yeah, Pacific FC scored the goal, and it was allowed, even though he was offside, according to the traditional understanding of the rule. He was not, in terms of the daylight description of what that means. I mean, we'll see. This is, I think they said the first time. This is the first time it's been done. The Canadian Premier League season is just getting underway. They've agreed to use it all season, and so we'll sort of see how it plays out. And then there's, I mean, if they like it, certainly the IFAB can adopt it into the rule book, and we might see this next year. I would be a little skeptical of that. Also, let me rephrase that. It's not going to happen for like next season in the Premier League, in part because like the Canadian Premier League is just getting started, whereas the season will end later this calendar year, certainly well after. So imagine they'll do it. There'll be a time to review. They'll vote. So I guess I'd say fall of 27 would be the earliest you might see this in a Premier League setting. But it's interesting to see, and I'll be kind of curious how this works out over time.
So let me ask you, do you think, so you're a forward player in Canada under this rule, do you think you play any differently, or do you think you basically play the same, but you just, more calls can go in your favor?
That's a good question. I think it's going to be interesting to watch and see, because I think you could think it's for both attackers and defenders, right? Because defenders run the offside trap in a particular way, right? You keep close, you step forward or step back, as the case may be. Same with strikers and forward players in terms of how they try to position themselves. I mean. We can point to an example from this past weekend's game about watching offside calls and sort of positioning yourself and timing your runs and things like that. I think it'll be interesting to watch, because again, like, you can write the rule, and if you watch the replay of the goal that actually gets counted, it comes off a scramble, so it's not quite the same kind of. It's not the same way we typically think of offside, which is players timing runs in behind defenders. It's a bit of a scramble that ends up, that is where the goal comes in. So it's. I think we're going to have to see it in action a few more times and really sort of see those particular moments where, okay, under the old system, like this goal, under the old system he was offside. Under the new one, he's not. And so I think we're going to need this again, first time. So we're going to need to see this a few more times before we can kind of judge what we're looking at here, which is the whole point of the whole thing. So,
right. So meanwhile, back across the pond, this was a fairly eventful week for Chelsea.
Yeah, that's one way to. I mean, truth is, every week is an eventful week when you're Chelsea. So we talked a little bit about some of the troubles they were facing. They were on a run of 5 games lost in the league. Apparently, I think I saw they were shut out in all 5, which I think was the last time that happened was the same year the Titanic was a thing.
Oh man.
So anyway, all of this led to the firing of Liam Rossinier, which we don't root for people to lose their jobs, and I'll be honest, I didn't really get enough about him to really decide whether or not I'm happy about this. Certainly from his perspective, he seems to me, and some of the stories that have come out afterwards, he seems to be simply a guy who was in over his head. Got promoted a little too soon for the kind of position Chelsea manager is. Also walking into a situation that it feels like it's increasingly becoming toxic, if it isn't already. The sound of it, the players were not terribly happy with Enzo Maresca being let go earlier, which led to Rossinior's hiring. So they're not happy about that. He hasn't exactly had a great deal of success in his career as a manager, partly because he's so young and hasn't really done anything yet. It's not a bad thing. It just it's too early to say, and so it's hard for him to command the same level of respect. Plus, I think the players are frustrated. It's a lot of young players. They don't really have veterans. They don't really have experienced players you can rely on to sort of help right the ship in bad times, and so they seem a little rudderless. And well, couldn't happen to a nicer club, I guess.
Well, and of course, when I'm talking about their eventful week, I mean, so like earlier in the week, Rossini was fired, but then today, I think, right, they ended up beating Leeds to advance to the FA Cup final. So
yes, in spite of all that, so the new manager bounces real. I forget his name, but I think he's their youth team manager who was called up to replace him on the sidelines. They got a goal, beat Leeds 1-0. They will be headed back to Wembley. They played the semis at Wembley. They'll be headed back to Wembley on May 16th to face Manchester City, who fell behind 1-0 to Southampton, but scored twice shortly thereafter and won 2-1. So City and Chelsea in the FA Cup final on May 16th. And I think we're all rooting for the Meteor. I will say this though, and because this I think is the more interesting thing is to shift the attention from Chelsea to Manchester City, because they also had a fairly eventful week. They officially went top of the table on Wednesday with a 1-0 win over Burnley. But now you look at them, they've got 5 league games remaining, with quite a logjam building up in their schedule. So the Burnley game was moved up as a result of their playing in the semifinals this weekend, but they still have the game against Crystal Palace left to play from when they were from advancing to the Carabao Cup final, and they have a game against Bournemouth that needs to be rescheduled because it's the weekend of the FA Cup final. The Palace game still remains to be seen when that's going to be rescheduled because they still have the semifinals of the Europa Conference League and then potentially the final. I think they should be able to get the Bournemouth game settled pretty quickly, although they may be waiting to see what happens with Palace before they do that. Basically, City's schedule is going to be kind of a mess through the end of the season, and I'm here for it. I think think about the struggles we had, and I think City's in a better place than we've been health-wise, and certainly in terms of their depth. But think about the struggles we've been having the last couple of months with the constant 2 games a week. All it takes is one little slip. All it takes is one little slip up in the league, and we an advantage Arsenal once again. Also, oddly enough, they're actually not going to play. So I'm looking at they are. We play on Saturday, which means we're going to be 2 games ahead of them in terms of games played. Their next game in the league isn't until Monday.
Yeah.
Their game against Everton got shifted to a Monday. So, their schedule's going to get a little weird over the last couple of weeks. And of course, the league doesn't want any of this to go beyond whatever date was the 24th, which is the whatever
decision
the
day
final,
or whatever.
The final day of the season. The following weekend, of course, is the Champions League final. And after that, I don't know that it's official, but like the next day, the 31st, like the U.S. is playing Senegal in a friendly. The World Cup kicks off like 12 days after that. So they're up against a hard deadline. They really can't push these much further. I looked at it at some point this afternoon, and I think I figured out which midweeks would make sense for these 2 games. But it's going to get a little hairy for them. And, honestly, what I'm really rooting from the FA Cup final is a very exhausting shootout and possibly a red card or 2. But
interesting.
It's going to be really interesting as we come down to the end, and we'll talk about it a lot more from the Arsenal perspective. But obviously, watching, City's got a lot of things that they're working around as well. So we'll see how this goes.
As far as you rooting for a red card, that would result in a Premier League suspension for the next match, right? At least
I think so, because
they're both
under the auspices of the FA. Correct. I think so. But also just because I suppose is a good reason as well.